Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Chris Shang, and today we've got Anthony Iannarino, sales leader and keynote speaker, sales expert guru. He's going to be sharing with us his decades plus long experience in sales and just kind of how he's seen from his personal experience and expertise that landscape evolve over that period of time, as well as what we've been seeing in terms of recent years going into this year and then in the near future, because it's changing very rapidly. Buyer behavior is changing very rapidly, as we just discussed. So how are you going to change sales? Anthony, thank you for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about what you've got going on and a little bit about yourself.
A little bit about me. So I'll give you the very shortest version of my history here. I started a paper route when I was 12 because somebody said, if you knock on all these doors, people will give you money. And I said, I'm knocking on all those doors. I had 300 Sunday papers. Everybody was mad at me because there was no way for me to get those done. At 15, I started making cold calls for a non-for-profit. We were trying to get people to do bike-a-thons. I was the only person to get one, but I'm also the only person to get two, and nobody else got a bike-a-thon. And they really wanted me to stay, but I had an opportunity to be a DJ for a skating rink where I'm 15 and there's 15-year-old girls. So there was no way I was coming back to cold calling. That was not going to happen. 17, I started working in my family's business and I was a recruiter. And my mom and her business partner said, if you don't have anybody to interview, call companies and see if they need anything. And I made my first call and the person said, call me back when you don't need a script. And I called my mom and her partner. I'm 17 years old. I have no idea what's going
Yeah.
on. And they said, call him back and say, I don't need the script. I just need a meeting. And I like, the guy already hung up on me once. He's going to hang up on me again. And they said, just call him. So I called him. He gave me a meeting. That was my first client. And I just went to Los Angeles to play rock and roll. You don't see that I was a hair metal guy, but I had hair down to my waist until I was 26 years old. And I was living in Brentwood, California.
Yep.
Loved the
Know the area.
place.
Yep.
I walked up the steps to my Brentwood apartment and had a grand mal seizure. And the interesting thing about having a grand mal seizure is you're the only one that doesn't know you had a grand mal seizure.
Mm.
Everybody else could see that. Two brain surgeries, one to glue a bunch of arteries and veins shut, and then the second to remove the bruised brain that would cause me to have seizures for the rest of my life.
Mm.
So they took good care of me in that. And then I decided to go back into my family's business, and we were doing $3 million at that time. And I went into sales, and I went from 3 million to 7.8 in the first year. So
Wow.
that was pretty good. Then I got a couple reps, and then from there we took off, and I grew the business to a little over $50 million
Wow.
with just four people on the sales team. That's all we had. So we've got Phoenix, Charlotte, and Columbus, Ohio. And that's where I learned how to sell. And the best thing that ever happened to me, and I know a lot of people are not going to think that this is the truth, you really want to sell a commodity first. Like
Mm.
you really want something with no differentiation at all, because that will teach you that the only thing that you ever have to win a deal is
Is
a
you.
conversation. That is the only thing that you have. It's not your solution. It's not your company. It's the conversation that you have with the people who are trying to get a better result. And I think the reason that I was really good at sales is because there is no differentiation. I've got a database full of people. So does everybody else in the city. And it's all the same people in the same databases. And then I just learned to tell people, I'm going to get you the very best unreliable people available. And they started to catch on, like they're temps, right? How long are they going to be here? Not that long.
Yep.
And from there, I decided in 2007 to start my own coaching business.
Got it.
And I did that for a couple of years. You can really burn out on coaching though. I
Sure.
mean, it's difficult to do. And then I decided I was going to start in 2009. I sat down with my wife and I said, I'm going to change what I do. I'm going to start getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I'm going to write a blog every single day because Tom Peters was doing that. Seth Godin was doing it. Chris Brogan was doing it. And I thought I can do that. I have something to say. I'm now 5,300 blogs in over 14 years. And I have six best-selling books, five on sales or sales management, and then just one on the negativity fast, which is trying to help people feel better
Mm,
post-COVID or
mm,
post-COVID now, I think, or something like that.
yeah, very cool. Thank
So
you
I
for
still do this. I still advise. What I
yep.
really like to do is large transformations to take people from what we call legacy approach to a modern methodology where you're actually creating value around the decision making. And one of the things that I'm really hot on right now is the era of solution is gone. Everybody's got a good solution. There's not a problem finding somebody to do something with, especially SaaS, right? How many SaaS companies are there? 40 billion, something like that, and more every day. I believe right now we're in this place where we've evolved to with the buyers is that now we're in the era of decision making. And because there's so much uncertainty, there's all kinds of stuff going on in Europe, there's stuff going on in the Middle East. We've got inflation. Powell says he's not worried about inflation, but he's not taking the rates down. So there's all these things that cause people to go, I don't know how to make a decision when all these factors are weighing on all these things. And I think that the people who are doing the best work in sales right now are the ones that I would describe as being one up.
Mm,
And it's not one upmanship, it's just being one up. So one up means I have greater knowledge and I have greater experience than the client because I sell this every day and they buy it occasionally, right? So
yeah,
they don't know how to make these decisions because they don't make them often enough. But when you think about what they're trying to do, they're trying to make a decision that's rare, strategic, and that they have to get it right on the first attempt. So what I notice as a salesperson, and I've got teams that work for me, what we see is that they're concerned about the decision making and they're trying to get it right. And they're trying to find somebody who can give them the education that would allow them to make that decision, that rare decision with a strategic outcome. And I think that the people who are one up, they're going to be experts and authorities. And the people who come in and they start talking about solutions or the why us and all that, I think all they're doing is wasting the client's time, wasting their own time, and making sure they're not going to be successful in the future.
yeah, uh, completely agree. I mean, what you're basically saying is that a great salesperson is a great problem solver. That's almost like at least has to come across and convey selflessness in that process.
Yes.
Uh, and so I 1,000% agree. I think how do you convey that, right? So like a salesperson, at least historically, I think it's kind of changing in terms of like how their comp structures are being built out, right? Because I think the way that the sales mindset was driven by how they were compensated, and as that if you're being compensated by like how many meetings you have or by how many customers do you get at what kind of ACV, then those are your motivators for trying to blast through and get to as much of that as you possibly can. But if you change the lures, if you change the motivators, you can change the tactic of the salesperson. um, what are your thoughts on that in terms of are you seeing any changes around that so that the salesperson can be intrinsically motivated by other means other than just closed won deals and the amount of meetings that they need to get?
Well, not everybody's going to love me, just so you know.
Sure, of
So
course.
I'm going to
I
tell
get
you
it.
that they're not going to love me. Uh, how do you know that somebody is money motivated?
Mhm.
They make a lot of money. That's how you know. So what percentage of salespeople are in that top 5% of revenue and commission? It's a very small number of people who are money motivated. I am, because my mom had 4 kids and we were super poor, and I fish sticks every day, and I'm never eating a fish stick again in my life. We had macaroni and cheese. So sometimes when you have a situation like that, you start to realize that I really want money, and some of us get wired that way. The rest of them want a comfortable job.
Mm-hmm.
They want to spend time with their families. They want to go and take vacations and all these other things. They want all kinds of other things outside of money. So I think when we start talking about compensation and commissions and all that stuff, I think that's a small number of people. If you go to anywhere on this earth, just drop yourself off and say Vienna and say, would you like more money? Anybody, even if they're rich, they'll go, yeah, I'd like some more money. Everybody wants money, but they're not motivated by that money, which is why most people don't have a lot of money, right?
Sure.
So I think that we have to find other ways to motivate people to do these things. So I have a number of people who work for me who think it's our job to help these people, and they feel good when they help them get the outcomes that they weren't able to get, and the money's just an afterthought. And I think that there's different people who are motivated by different things, and a good coach and a good sales manager will know what each of their intrinsic motivation is. And if they don't do that and try to get that right out of the gate, it's very hard to manage them well, because you're not giving them what they really need to be happy in their lives and their work.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, I agree. I mean, so let's take a look, based on your past experience here. You've, been doing sales for a long time, helped the family business grow from 3 million to 50 plus million. And, what was the style and the tactic that you were using at that time? How have things shifted to today? Um, and if there's any kind of like chapters within there in terms
Yeah.
of you feel like that there's like, yeah, different stages or evolutions of this of the of the typical B2B sales person, right? Because I do
Yeah.
feel like it's even my experience in just the past decade has I've seen a lot of
Oh,
changes,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
If you're paying attention, you're going to notice that things have changed.
Yeah.
When I started, I didn't have a sales manager, and all I was told was to call people and try to get meetings.
Hmm.
And I got some meetings. And my approach was to ask a lot of questions at that time. And I was what we would call one down. I
Mm.
didn't, they know way more about their business, and they know way more about what I'm trying to do than I knew at that time, because I was too young and I never had a sales manager. So I had to figure out a lot of things myself. But what happened to me after my brain surgery, I started to realize there's people that I'm talking to who can give me an education on how I create value for them. Like, what am I doing for them that would actually be this? And this is one of my main structures in this book called Eat Their Lunch. And it's you don't talk about the product, you don't talk about the solution, you don't talk about the service, because you're in a commodity. So nobody cares. There's nothing differentiating enough to get attention. So what I started asking people is like, what's the most important thing for me to do? And I'm selling temporary staffing. And they would say, we want lower uh, cost of moving this stuff from this place to this place. Or they would say, we want to be able to hire these people so we don't have to have our HR people bogged down with this. And they started giving me the strategic outcomes that they wanted instead of the staffing, because nobody wants temporary staffing. They want the outcome of that. And I started to realize that if I just talked about like, what do they really want at the end of this? Because it's not temporaries. It's we have a deadline for this distribution, and if we don't have these people, then we could lose the client. And it was things like that. So I went through a whole bunch of the eras. So the era of why us, I had a great, beautiful slide deck. I went down to Cincinnati, met with a company called Takumi, reached out to get my laptop, The guy said, if you open that laptop, I'm going to throw you out of here. And I said, why is that? And he said, I'm going to ask you some questions. If you answer them and you get them right, I'm going to sign a contract with you, but I don't want to see one slide. And 2 weeks later, a friend of mine called and he said, I was plugging in my laptop and the senior leader said, if you open that up, I will throw you out of here and you will never come back. And I'm like, they hate slides. They don't really hate slides. They hate the why us in those slides. And I did that until it sort of weared off. And then after that, we had this thing where the solution was everything. And then we had this idea that the linear sales process was going to make everybody successful. None of these things ever gave us what we were promised. We were promised, like, if you use this sales process, every salesperson's going to be able to reach their quota. That's never happened. The people who were already good were still good. The people that weren't good still weren't good and didn't change. And so I started to notice that there are some things that you have to have if you want to do enterprise level selling. So that's what I did. I had like the Limited, Victoria's Secret catalog, Procter and Gamble, Coca-Cola, big companies like that. And what I realized is that all you have is the conversation. That's the only thing. And you have to have information that they don't have. So this is information disparity. I know something you don't know. Now, if you know something that they don't know that could help them make that decision, then you're going to have a very easy time with clients. If you don't know things that they don't know, or if you're subservient and you believe that this person, just because they have a C-level uh, title, that you think that they're somehow aware of all the things that you should know because you sell it every day, when they don't feel like they're the expert, then people don't want to buy from them because they want somebody who knows what they don't know. And I do this with every CEO I ever get to meet with. I normally wait until we have some good rapport, and then I grab their arm a lot harder than they think I should be grabbing them. And I just say this: how long until people figure out you have no idea what the hell you're doing? And they all say the same thing. There's no CEO school. Like you get put into this role, you didn't expect to be in it. You expected somebody else to do this. And I still don't know if I can do this. And they are really, like, in those kind of conversations, they're very candid. Like, it's very hard. Like, you have to know all these things and you can't know all of them. And I think when people would, if they would know that that person is just another person and they know a lot of things, but they don't know a lot of other things. And if you want to be a really good salesperson, you have to give them the education that they don't have because they don't do what you do. And the more people understand that that's how this works, the better their results become.
Absolutely. Um, I think I think there are a lot of wheels turning, but I think one of the biggest challenges that it's like going through the repetitions for that salesperson to get confidence. So I would say that the
Agreed.
key differentiator from like junior salespeople and even like mid-level salespeople that I've encountered to those that become sales leaders, keynote speakers like yourself or experts in that field is what you just basically pointed out, which that human connection, understanding that the person that they're talking to is just another human being, the
Yeah.
ability to connect with them on a very empathetic, just very authentic level. And that takes a certain level of confidence where you're no longer concerned. It doesn't matter about talking about solution, about product, about why us. It's nothing to do with any of those things. If they have questions about those things, that needs to be so second nature for you to just be able to, you know, come up with it. I think that the issues with the junior salespeople is like they're so obsessed with thinking that about those things because they don't confidently perhaps know it backwards and forwards to the point if somebody just asked them a point blank question, they felt comfortable to give them an answer off the cuff. Have you, I guess my laying that out there foundationally, like, is there any things that you've noticed that either around coaching, training, or even just inherent innate traits of an individual that you see that can differentiate from a salesperson that's just gonna, again, Just
I wrote this
go for
morning.
it.
That was my blog post today. It was
Awesome.
about there's some things that people just have innate.
Yeah.
You might have like my younger sisters, they have very fast rapport skills. They walk in and people start hugging them, and you're like, they met him for the first time. Like, how does that happen? Never happens to me like that, but it does. They have this very fast. They also sometimes have some other innate characteristics where they're just so likable and just so engaging that it's very easy for people to want to buy with them. And that's another innate. But then there's some things that are not innate, like business acumen, totally missing right now. That's terrible. Most people don't have a modern methodology right now, and they're suffering because they're still doing things the way that they used to. If they don't have some sort of understanding of where the gaps are on the client side of like what they couldn't know because they don't have the experience, and if people do the work to build those things, it makes it very, very easy for people to want to buy from them. So I've got a number of lists of things I would tell you that I think is important. I also think that if they don't get to this point where I call it one up,
Hmm.
is they're going to have a tougher time hitting their goals than if we do this the way that we like to do it. So we enable that for people so that they can, like, I'll give you my largest transformation was a $5 billion company. Legacy, very legacy. I mean, a lot of people just waiting for them to call to get
Huh.
an order. And I moved them to a modern methodology. And after we finished that, it was a couple years. It's about 1,500 reps and
Huh.
220 managers. So at the end of that, uh, they had $900 million more after we did that. So that next year they added $900 million.
Wow.
And they said, we didn't want to tell you that because we thought you were going to send another invoice. And I said, I probably should.
Yeah.
That's a lot of revenue, but that's a lot of people to
Yeah.
generate that revenue. And that's what I did is I came in and I explained to them that you know a lot of things, but you haven't organized them in a way that you can use them in the sales conversation. So I moved them to this place where they could start talking about this is the right thing if you want to do this, but it's wrong if you want to do it this way. And we started helping them understand how to have an insight based sales approach.
Hmm.
And I think that that's what most people should probably be doing right now. I will tell you, I think that people are hollowing out B2B selling. I think that they're too transactional. I think that they do stupid things like saying, I need velocity. Why? Because you think the client can go as fast as you can go. You already know this. This is the first time they're hearing this. They need more time. Like it's not a race to see who gets this done sooner. It's who wins. And that's the only thing that you should care about. I care about win rates.
Hmm.
That's the one KPI that everybody avoids because they don't like to look at numbers that say 22%. And all of my teams are at 85%.
Huh.
So 85%, but that's a lot of work to get there. But after that, then everything is easy.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want to take that easy route. They want to try to go the faster route. The
Yeah.
fastest route is the slow route.
Yeah.
Where are you from exactly?
I'm in Los Angeles.
No, but where are you from originally?
Oh, my ethnicity. I'm Chinese.
Yeah, I know that. Where?
Uh, I was born in Chicago. I'm half from China, Taiwan, and then half from Hong Kong. So my mom's Cantonese.
I've been to China a whole bunch of times.
Yeah.
And the Chinese have a greater patience than we do in America. Yeah, so they
I, I would say around certain things. I think also
about certain things. That's probably right.
customer
Yeah.
service, they do not have as much patience, or uh in a restaurant is not a good, it's not a good look for that culture for sure. But yeah, I mean, I hear you. I think from a business perspective, there is that patience. I think it's just that there is a nature to it too of like how culturally the business processes worked in Asia. Obviously, a lot of the times it has to go through some kind of like government regulator as well, and so you have to be patient with that, whether it's ethical or non-ethical. That's another question sometimes, but that's kind of part of how business is done there.
Yeah.
Um, and I get that. I think like and when you're talking just kind of about you know, win rates and getting to that 80 some percent. I also was thinking about sales cycle, right? Like that's another variable that companies tend to look at. Obviously, it's more so in the earlier stages. But I agree that like there's too much emphasis of trying to close something too fast. I also do think that there are ways to optimize against super long sales cycles where I don't think enough companies actually audit the customer journey of how they bought. How did they end up buying? And like analyzing that data in mass across all of your customers to understand what are the common threads of the common interactions that actually do need to happen versus
Yeah.
the ones that were superfluous. And sometimes that also goes into another conversation I had with the sales is like relationship mapping, like
Yeah.
especially enterprise side, like mapping out a relationship prior to a conversation with anybody from that prospect side of things so that you have an understanding of what are the stakeholders that are involved so you can help be more proactive around moving that needle versus reliant upon somebody. And I think a lot of that goes to attention, and the amount of attention and excitement somebody actually has around something. I see a lot of times where a salesperson gets a great meeting, does not have a great call to action or even just kind of focus on how to get to a call to action. So they think it's a great meeting. It's too open-ended. And then that drags out for 2, 3, 4 weeks, a lot of times without even
Or months.
or months, right? So any
Yeah.
thoughts around that? I think especially around the idea of attention, because nowadays you said 4 billion SaaS products, right? Like if you got somebody on a conversation right now, like I feel like you have their attention for a finite amount of time, and you need to create some kind of expectation, some kind of like next action. And I think you have to thread it where it's not too overly pushy on like an actual call, but like implant some kind of seed of thought of expectation as to what the next step is if they're expressing that lean in, that head nodding motion.
Yeah,
You got
this book,
thought.
The Lost Art of Closing,
There
is
you go.
my structure for 10 different conversations that I found to be the most helpful for the
Yep.
client. Even though they don't want to have some of these
Yep.
conversations, I still want to do that. What I would say about that is that you can't go faster than your client can. If
Absolutely.
you go faster than they can go, then they're going to drop out. And some point, that's going to be a problem. And I also think that our job is to facilitate the buyer's journey. And why? Because we do it every day. They don't do it every day. They do it occasionally. So we should be telling them, like, if you want these people to weigh in later, they need to be here in the early conversations.
Yep.
Otherwise, they have no idea why we made the decisions. How do we get them in here? And when can we do that? And I'm going to ask the how first, like how, because I need them in there. And if they're not there, I'm going to tell you, your chances of winning just continue to go down and down
Yep.
and down the longer they stay out. So I'm going to tell them, I normally ask permission-based questions like, would it be okay if I give you some of experiences that we've had that made it easier for people? And then I'm going to ask permission again. And then after my second permission, I'm just going to start telling them what to do because I want them to know, like, I know how to do this for you, and I know we can how we can walk this through, and it's better. And I don't think that salespeople are being taught that it's their job to be the Sherpa for these people. Like you're supposed to be doing it for them. They don't have a clue. They don't buy it often enough. If they bought every day, no problem, right? Let's be
Yeah.
transactional. All you have to do is show up and give them an order, right? That's it. But that's not where we are. We're in this place where I call it the AC/DC environment. I played rock and roll. I was a dead ringer for Bon Scott from AC/DC, but it's not that AC/DC. It's a accelerating, constant, disruptive change. That's where we are. And so when people are uncertain, they lack the confidence, it's a rare decision. What should you do? give them enough time that they can have that certainty and that confidence. And it needs to be from somebody who is proven that they have the expertise to be able to give you that kind of advice and recommendations. This is consultative selling. I don't believe that we're doing that anymore. I think it's still about solutions, and people haven't caught up that this is about decision making now. And that's where we are. And it'll change in the future. I don't know what it will change to, but it will continue to evolve as buyers need different things from us.
Absolutely. You hit a lot of nails on the head right here. I have a question around onboarding slash implementation time, uh, the cost of transferring to a new solution, even if it's a better solution, right, from a buyer's perspective. I was doing an advisory with an AE of a company selling into like a freight forwarding logistics company. And, you know, to your point, they're on legacy software of 20 plus years, like 10, 20 years. They don't want to transition because of the headache of the data, and they don't even know that how they don't know what's possible. They only know all of our 10 plus 20 years receipts and our accounting and all of that's already here. It's clunky, it's horrible, we hate using it, but just the fact that it's all there is, and then the idea of having to move that is just that kills any kind of like sales conversation. I see that happen a lot. Um, and
Well,
not enough
listen,
salespeople are
if
trained to like handle those things. They're not even
we
talking about it. They're talking
we
about the why, us.
we start with why change.
Yeah.
So what I do, my methodology starts with an executive briefing. And in my executive briefing, we have a strategy that we call context locking. So if I tell you that you have to have 2.21 babies for every woman in America if you want our population to stay where it is right now. And when I tell you that, now you don't have an opinion about it anymore because I already told you what the numbers are.
Hmm.
If you're in China, uh, one per woman, they're no not they're just at one right now. That's the lowest number, and the Chinese now are the oldest people ever to live on human Earth. That there's never been, and there's like 600 million that's towards the end of their life. And when I tell you that, you can argue with me. I love arguing with you. I would argue with you for hours, but I'm not going to argue with a client. So I want to get them the context that we're talking about and the why change at the beginning. If you don't want to do it now, wait until it gets worse and you've got all kinds of problems in there and see if it's any easier later. Like you should move now. So I would probably set them up with, let me tell you what happens when people don't do this and how much time it takes. And I
Yeah.
would try to put them in a box, and then I'm going to probably put some nails in the top of that and make sure that they stay in the context that I gave them, because they have these false assumptions, they have outdated beliefs, and all of those things cause people to say it's not right for us to do this right now. But when I tell them that this is the why change, it's a lot easier. And I get, Chris, a whole bunch of people ask me, how do I motivate them at the end of this? Too late. You motivate them at the beginning. You don't wait and have this conversation and then try to motivate them. Motivate them at the very beginning. Anytime you have a problem in sales, you move it to the front of the conversation. Like, I don't care what the problem you have is. They don't like our price. Tell them at the beginning and say, let me tell you how we're going to spend this money to make sure that you don't have the concessions that you're going to get from other people with a low price uh, solution. So anything that keeps showing up, you move it to the front and get it out of the way at the beginning. It's a lot easier. My staffing company, when I was doing this, we had a higher price than anybody. And I came in and I would say, listen, I'm going to tell you at the beginning, we're going to be 8 to 12% more than any other buddy that you're going to get a quote from. But as we have this conversation, I'm going to explain to you how I'm going to spend this money in a way that's different from other people to make sure that you don't have the concessions that other people would let you have. And now I have the whole sales conversation to do that. I
Hmm.
don't want to do it at the end. I don't want to
Yeah.
surprise you with a
Yeah.
higher price. I wanted you to know at the beginning, if you want better, then this is how we do it. So I've done this now for in staffing 37 years. So I know what I know simply because I study and I pay attention to what works and what doesn't work. And that kind of thing, like tell them the truth at the very beginning and let them know they're adults. If they want better results, they know they have to pay more, right? They might
Yeah.
not want to. They might not have the budget to, but I'm going to tell them the truth anyway. Why not? Eventually they'll come back around.
Absolutely. I love it. There's so many more things I would like to go into. I think like even just the idea of like bringing up price to the top of a conversation, I feel like so many companies are holding off on price, and that becomes such a big deal killer because you get them excited, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, shit, I can't afford that. Like,
Exactly.
I mean, why? We just had this whole conversation, or it's like, or it's just off-putting. You know what I mean? Like it just comes off as off-putting at the end of it, and I 100% agree. I think that you should front load a lot of those hard conversations at the very beginning. It gives you the room to explain.
Yeah,
Um, and if you don't do that, it just leaves talk about attention, like the last bit of attention that they're giving you is going to be leaving on a negative note.
absolutely. Yeah, I've seen it so many times where people give the quote at the end of the sales conversation, and then they're trying to figure out like they called and they said they have a lower price. Of course they do. Somebody's always going to have a lower price, right? You
Yeah,
should have done that at the beginning and said, we're going to be a little bit higher. Here's why. And this is what you're going to get for the 12 pennies you give me. It's easier to say 12 pennies than 12%, right? It's just
yeah,
12 pennies
yeah,
on every dollar.
yeah. That's count. Yeah, definitely counter. I think a lot of the traditional B2B sales methods there of like withholding price, and I've never understood that either. Because I just don't feel like it helps anybody. I mean, I think about it from our if I'm even buying a software for my business, I mean, one of the biggest evaluators is price, and nobody wants to do these meetings. Nobody wants to do these demos, right? It's like we have to. It's like a necessary evil to get to the price, which is kind of ridiculous.
I had a guy call me a couple of weeks ago, and because I'm so pro salesperson, I am like the most pro
Yeah,
salesperson you'll ever know. And the guy called me and he said, "Do you have coaching? Do you coach people?" Yeah, and I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, we have this great software for coaching." And I said, "I'm not interested." And he said, "Why not?" And I said, I don't need that. I've been coaching for a long time." And he said, "Well, you really just need to see the demo." And I said, "I've seen software before.
yeah,
It's going to have a like maybe
yeah,
first name, maybe followed by last name." I'm like, I don't need to see it. I know what software looks like. It's not interesting anymore, right?
yeah.
It's just not interesting. Like, you know what software looks like. What are you going to think that it's not going to look like other software? It looks just like that. And then he cut to the chase and said, "I only get paid if you take a demo." And I said, "You're going to go hungry tonight. I'm not, I'm not responsible for feeding you."
That's crazy. I go back. We were just talking about that earlier. I mean, just the what they're motivated by. It's such a it is broken. I think we're gonna see I think a lot of sales teams gonna have to reevaluate the way that they structure things. On that note, last question because we're up on time, but in terms of we talked a lot about just kind of where you came from, what you've seen in terms of the evolution, the different phases of sales, right? And I think you spoke about it. It is now much more focused on understanding what the buyer's needs are and coming across and helping them selflessly. Uh, are there any other ways of and maybe this is like a hybrid of I think like sales and marketing of like driving awareness together, but I think like how are you thinking about um now and then going into the future, this idea of community as part of sales, because that's become a
Yeah,
hot topic, and using community as a way to drive value and awareness when people are not in these buying patterns, and maybe catching them at, in a more larger scale of when they might start thinking about them, because as you mentioned, this is something that they do very infrequently,
right.
by helping them drive, yeah, that awareness of it.
On this book, Eat Their Lunch, I gave people this idea of how I succeeded. I picked 60 people, 60 companies that all spent over $1 million in staffing.
Mm,
That's a very good list. And I explained to them, you have to nurture them. So what we call this is just let's say a deposit in the relationship. So we're always giving them the insights. We're always briefing them. We're always telling them what's going on. We communicate it all the time through HubSpot's what we use, and we take things and we make sure that we're giving them this awareness of what's going on. And I had a conversation with a person earlier today, and we were talking about using our executive briefing and giving them our structures. And he said, "Do you have a executive briefing on sales?" And I'm like, why wouldn't I have one? Like I use that since 2001 up until now. Of course, I have an executive briefing for sales leaders to help them understand that context locking. Like I'm going to lock you in this so you know what win rates are, what quota attainment is, what are the obstacles. And we of course we do that. And that's how we start because I want them to understand that there's a lot of headwinds and doing something like being more transactional or asking for velocity, those are not the right strategies right now. That's not the right thing. If everybody was certain, you could probably go faster. If they
yeah,
had more experience, you could probably go faster. But outside of that, you can't go faster than your client can.
yeah. On that note, thank you so much for taking the time. I think you a lot of great nuggets in here. That was amazing, very insightful. I learned a lot personally. I thought it was great the way that you kind of explained things in this very like calm and logical and sensible demeanor, even though I'm sure it was a lot of repetitions to get to these conclusions and these, yeah, because I know how it works. You got to experiment and try a lot of things before you kind
Oh
of get
yeah.
to the one that settles. But yeah, I mean, lots of great things, and it shows in terms of the way that you've been able to explain it, just the decades long experiences of having been in it. So, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course.